So
Yeah.
no, I just mean like I'm so passionate about some of these missions that I'm happy to talk about them.
Yeah, yeah, awesome. Yeah, no, it's definitely cool that you've got kind of a cool purpose thing behind everything that you do. So we've kind of been poking around your story, and it's super inspiring, really. So, I'm just
Right.
definitely grateful that you could take the time. So,
Yeah.
but cool, cool. All right. Well, I guess we'll just kind of loosely jump into it here. I'll do like a pre-recorded, kind of like a blurb, just giving your history and your background and kind of like, what Muse does and what Muse offers and all that kind of stuff. So we'll just kind of make our way into it here, if that's cool with you.
Yeah, that sounds good. And in the background, um, uh, if you, we'll get into it. But if you want to mention Sonic Cradle as well, I think
Gotcha.
it does sort of a story of, an academic project and then an industry project, which I think provides a good context. So when I'm like giving conference presentations and stuff like that, I always make sure that people introduce with both. So it's like there's an academic perspective on this stuff, and then there's also an industry perspective.
Right, right. Okay. Yeah, perfect. We'll definitely make note and we'll be sure to I'll send you over the blurb of what we pre-record. I mean, it'll be pretty comprehensive, but just for comfort, if you just want to take a peek, I'll shoot it over to you. But we'll definitely include both Sonic Cradle and Muse. So
Yeah,
we'll
you don't have to send it over, but that's fine.
okay. Cool,
Yeah,
cool. No, that's awesome. Thanks, man.
yeah.
Um, okay, and then just kind of get some nuts and bolts out there. How do you pronounce your last name? I don't want to butcher it. That would be the worst thing known to man. So is it Vidyarthi, or is I just wanted to hear
Yeah,
you.
you're really close. It's Vidyarthi. So the only complication is the D.
Mhm.
Think of it kind of like the DTH in the word width, like
Okay,
like height, length, and width.
like Vidyarthi.
No, like like the WIDTH width.
Right.
So pronounce the D like the DTH. So Vidyarthi.
Okay, that's tough. Vivyarthi.
There you go. That's closer for sure. Vidyarthi.
Vivyarthi. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, no, that's I like that. Vivyarthi. Okay, cool.
Cool.
Awesome.
Great. Thanks for taking an effort to pronounce it right. I appreciate
Oh
that.
yeah, I mean that's the least I could do, right?
Right.
So, okay, cool. Well, let's jump into it, Jay. We touched a little bit on your background, and I just kind of wanted to sort of run through, how you came to be, the UX design master you are today. It looks like, originally you had a background in kind of like a psych neuroscience lean. So, how did you make the transition into UX design? Like, what really kind of got you into going down this design path from where you started out?
Yeah, I actually started out in physics. So so when I went to university, I was taking physics, and I had a moment when I was studying electromagnetism in second year where I looked to my left and looked to my right, and I was like, I love physics, but I am not one of these people. But everyone seemed to like, as it got really complex, everyone seemed to really gravitate towards it and understand it so clearly. And I realized I was more of a subjective learner. At which point I dropped out of school, played some music for a while, and then came back in psychology and neuroscience,
Awesome.
which was sort of like which was sort of like a passion I had wanted to explore for a long time. I've always been interested in psychology and mental health, reading books about it. I read a book called Gödel Escher Bach when I was a teenager, and it was just totally inspired me. And so then at the end of my degree, I was at McGill University in Montreal. I lived in Italy for about 3 or 4 months to do an undergraduate thesis with my supervisor there. And the thesis was in psychophysics, which is sort of right at the heart of neuroscience and psychology and physics. And right there, I kind of had this amazing experience where I wasn't that interested in the research question, but I was watching our participants, these Italian high school students, engage with our experiment. And I just noticed that they were like super bored. They weren't that engaged. And it was supposed to be psychological data. And I was like, you know what? Like, how realistic is the data we're going to get when these, high school kids are just coming, they want their 10 euros, they're barely even paying attention to our experiment. And so I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know the word at the time, but what I did was I essentially gamified the experiment. So I turned it into a bit of a game. I put some visuals. I used music to kind of make it sort of incorporate a sort of more playful, relatable atmosphere. And then everyone was really engaged with it, and the data became a lot better, a lot more clear, and a lot more representative of the real findings we were looking for. And so when I came back to Canada, I had this new interest in sort of the human factor. So not just the theory and the physics and the psychology and the neuroscience, but how to actually create a medium or an interface that's more engaging. And that sort of was my bridge into UX.
Wow, that's an awesome story. Yeah, it's you always hear the best stories are the ones that aren't exactly the linear path, right? Kind of bouncing around and sort of lateraling from, I guess you could say reasonably blanketable kind of fields of study, but at the same time totally different. So that's an incredible story. And then
Yeah,
I guess just quickly, so when, within the products that you're kind of dealing with, whether it's Muse or Sonic Cradle, in both kind of like the consumer end or, like you said, in the academic end, are you more focused on, I guess just to clarify for our listeners, like, do you deal more with like, like interface type applications or like more like engineering, like the actual product for like user experience, or is it like a little bit of both? Or I just kind of wanted to clarify there.
so both in academic and industry contexts, my priority is the human being that is using the technology. And
Okay.
so whatever needs to be done to create the best possible experience for the human being. So, whether that's working with the digital signal processing and research and EEG team here at Muse, or whether that's actually building a sensor-based interface for Sonic Cradle, I've been kind of chasing creating an experience, an authentic experience, an engaging experience of mindfulness using technology. And that mission has led me to building prototypes and coding, all the way to designing mobile interfaces, to thinking about digital signal processing, to doing journal studies, diary studies, research interviews, design sprints, facilitating design thinking, all kinds of stuff. But the one common theme was, how do we make an authentic experience of mindfulness for real human beings out there who need it, who might be stressed or might be engaged in meditation, but not really resonating with the typical approaches like a usual guided meditation or going off to a class with some person with a calming voice that's supposed to somehow help you, or someone who's addicted to their phone or their technology. Like, how can we actually bring an authentic version of this practice to that audience?
Gotcha. Yeah, I think you touched on a really good point, because it's like, how much of public data and kind of statistical sway out there is based off of just kind of, biased information and also unengaged response type information. I mean, I think this is something that's totally crucial today. And, it's incredible that we have people like you that are at least aware that this is a need and something that needs to be developed. So definitely, it's definitely something worth noting. But okay, well, I just wanted to move forward here. In terms of, looking at some of the literature surrounding your name and kind of the causes that you've been identified with. I see this term human-centered design constantly popping up around your name, as you kind of touched on some of your experiences in Italy that kind of sparked all that. I just was curious, why is this whole notion of like the human specific experience so important to your process? I mean, why does it resonate with you so strongly?
There's a lot of terms for this intersection between design and, research, right? There's like research-driven design and user experience and user-centered design, design thinking, human-computer interaction, user interface design, interaction design. There's so much jargon. And, the reason why the term human-centered design captures it for me is that fundamentally I think of this entire field as a design philosophy. And it's a philosophy that states that we're going to put the holistic human being at the center of our design process to make sure that we satisfy their needs, we respond to their motivations, which means we're going to study them in order to inspire our concepts. We're going to bring our prototypes to evaluate with them. We're going to look at the experiences they have in the wild with our artifacts and use that to iterate and improve. And ultimately, we're going to look at the human being and their experience as the grounding point for our design process. And I also want to add that, as opposed to user experience or user-centered design, I appreciate the term human-centered design because it suggests that people are a holistic entity in context to their environment, in context to their friends, in context of their social scenes and their family and their background and their cultural backgrounds. And it sort of acknowledges that diversity of perspectives, whereas user-centered design is kind of treating people like their only purpose is to use your product. And I've seen it result in some pretty shoddy design thinking in the past. And so human really reminds us that there are real people out there that are affected by our decisions. So it keeps that empathy and compassion in our design process. And it also keeps that awareness of the full context and the holistic element of the human experience that's required to do good design work.
Wow, yeah. I mean, that's huge, and I think that's such a salient way of thinking, right? Given that, you see a lot of products out there that they seem to be maximized from like a sales funnel kind of perspective, right? And even things like, even current state of medicine, right? People tend to forget that the human being is a holistic animal, constantly in relation to tons of systems within ourselves and immediate environment. So I think you guys are onto something incredible, and if that's the basis of your kind of your design-centered thought process for how you go about things. So that's definitely amazing. Okay.
Yes, I mean it's always a negotiation, right? So there's all these different forces at play. One of the differences working in academia versus industry is what forces are at play, right? So having tried to build mindfulness-based technology both as an academic research project and as a consumer product in a startup, I've been able to identify the very different forces at pull. But I feel like my role as a designer is always to advocate for that, empathic approach, that compassionate approach for the human being at the end of the chain. And so it's always a negotiation, but my feeling is that the responsibility of the designer is to represent the human being. And that's why I really subscribe to the term human-centered design. I think that really defines what I believe not only the role of a designer, but also the responsibility of a designer.
What are, with the background in design, what are some of your personal influences when it comes specifically to design? Like what do you kind of look to and sort of highlight or even revisit often when, in your mind when you're thinking about design, whether it be, various different avenues or simple or complex, what's kind of moved you in the design world, present or past?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I think there's a part of me that's a process nerd. So I really get inspired by books like Jake Knapp's book, Sprint, and Jeff Godhelf's Lean UX. These kind of books that are outlining how to bring the design process, into the world. I was really inspired a lot by some of the early technologies that explored this kind of mindfulness element. So one great example is a thing called Osmos by a designer in the 90s named Char Davies. It was basically a really early virtual reality experience where you sort of explored your own body, but it was connected to your actual body. So like you had a heart rate sensor on and you had a breathing sensor. And then in the virtual world, you're like exploring the torso of your own body, and the heart is actually beating at your heart rate. Whoa. And the lungs are actually breathing at your breath rate, which just, totally a transcendent experience. And that was really inspiring for me about, the potentials of what technology could do. In terms of more recent inspiration, I'm really, I found the independent video game called Journey that was produced by That Game Company was like one of the greatest examples of a contemplative or meditative technology out there. But I'm also inspired by amazing work in the field. Like there's a wide range of mindfulness and meditation tools like, Muse, of course, is great, but we've been really excited about all the other amazing developments like Spire and Headspace and, Wellbe and all these really, really cool things, guided meditation VR. And I think the final thing that I'll say about inspiration is like there's also a part of me that's sort of like a user interface designer. And I'm really interested in simple, minimal, easy to understand design. So I really look up to Google's interface design. I also really like Dropbox. And so these are not typically the kind of things you hear designers talk about, because designers are often like, ooh, it's so beautiful. But for me, what's beautiful is something that solves a problem really, really well. And I find that Dropbox is almost like an egoless design, or maybe it's changed a little bit now, but when it first came out, I was really blown away about how it just was invisible. There was no big interface. It just sort of merged into a folder on your computer. It hid away in the taskbar. There wasn't any big bloated, iTunes style interfaces where you had to set everything up and take over your whole screen. You just installed it and it kind of hid in a folder and stayed in the corner of your screen and just really solved a problem for you without getting in the way.
Yeah, it's so simple.
Exactly. Like I appreciate that simplicity. And of course, Google started that by, fighting the search engine wars with just a search box in the realm of like Alta Vista and Metacrawler and all these crazy bloated search engines. They really started that push towards simplicity in design. Just solve a problem, solve it really, really well, and make the interface as easy to use as possible. I really am inspired by that kind of design.
Yeah, it's funny. I was just kind of toying around with Dropbox earlier this morning and yesterday, and I kind of had the same thought. I remember I was thinking like, "Oh, this is so simple, but so effectively simple that it's perfectly sleek design, like at its finest." So I'm really glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I mean, like, you use the word sleek. It's like, I think about a car when I think about sleek, but they're almost like with Dropbox, there isn't even an edge to be sleek. Like you drag your file into this folder and just in the background, it syncs it. It doesn't tell you anything. It doesn't get in your way. It just does its job and it stays out of your way. And I really like that.
Yeah, I've actually have you toyed around with Feedly at all? Have you ever heard of Feedly?
Yeah, I used Feedly for a while. I stopped now, but I did for about a year.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of late to the party on this one, but that's another, sort of high example in my mind as of late that I can think of something that's like pretty strong design functionality that's just like relatively simple and like seems to kind of declutter everything for me personally. I mean, do you have something you've been opting towards now, or did you kind of just fall on the wayside?
That I used to like organize my, you mean like my feeds?
Yeah, like a Feedly alternative.
Actually, what I've been doing now is I use this thing called Unroll Me, which is like it collects all your email subscriptions and puts them into a feed for you, which I thought was super cool.
Okay.
So instead of using a feed reader now, I just subscribe to these newsletters and then add them to Unroll Me. So these newsletters don't actually appear in my inbox. They appear in the like Unroll thing.
Okay, gotcha.
And as an added feature, it also lets you really easily unsubscribe from things. Like it basically manages all your email subscriptions. I mean, the interface is not great, but the functionality is really cool. And I should say, on the same kick of really simple, beautiful interface designs that get the job done, I'm a huge fan of Medium. They've basically taken the entire blogosphere, if that's even a word anymore. They've taken it and just turned it into something uniform, simple, and universal. And one of the things I love about it is the way it democratizes. So I can write an article and it basically is in the same format as big brands or leaders in the field or whatever. It always looks in the same democratized approach. So when you're reading on Medium, you're not very cognizant of whether you're reading something from some leader in the field or just an independent. And that really lets independent voices kind of shine through, which I love.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point. I mean, I was actually reading one of your articles earlier that you sent over, and I guess we'll touch on that in a second. It'll be a good segue. But I remember thinking like, some blog writers, they kind of like literally within every sub paragraph and headline, there's just like, crazy bells and whistles in terms of, kind of the way they format everything, and everything's bolded and italicized. And, obviously like you can still do some of that on Medium, but I remember I was just thinking the exact same thing that, it's relatively ubiquitous across posts, right? Where like, it's more dependent on good content and kind of like the pictures you throw in and some of the quotes and sort of the way you kind of, really bring your skill set to writing to the table, because yeah, I mean, it just kind of levels the playing field and it really looks good for everybody. It's an incredible platform. So definitely agree with you on that one.
Yeah.
But, okay, cool. Then I guess this is a good segue to we'll kind of bounce around a little bit, but we'll definitely highlight your article in the show notes. But you sent over a piece for me to check out, and it was an incredibly written piece, and super salient for kind of the edge that we're teetering on today as it relates to the wide availability of data and how that affects personal psychology and sort of the whole new advertising 2.0 scenario given the overabundance of search engine data and the way it's kind of pawned off. So the title of this article, and I definitely suggest everybody check it out, all of our listeners, this is a great read. It's In the Attention Economy, Mindfulness is Activism, written by Jay. and it basically highlights, that the attention economy is, a neo kind of, faceted economy in which our human attention is a commodity being bought and sold, at every corner. Your search engine data is essentially, being tossed off to advertising companies who are, literally just bombarding your feeds with kind of, personalized advertising information. So I was just hoping quickly if you could just touch on this article. I mean, why is this so important? Why is our attention being jockeyed for? And, why is something like mindfulness so important in averting that? And, I think you mentioned in the article specifically, I think this is genius. It says mindfulness is attention activism. So, I mean, wrapping all this up, I mean, why is this all important? And, what does that mean? Mindfulness is attention activism.
So, I mean, like, it's a huge topic, right? Like we could do a whole hour just on this, but the basic crux, like the basic thrust here is that about 100 years ago, people have been advertising in the sense of like bringing a little bit of a statement from your business into a newspaper for, 200 years, right? But about 100 years ago, so the latter half of that, it went from like a simple ad into sort of persuasive campaigns, right? So, starting with patent medicines into the British campaign for conscription in World War I, into the modern advertising industry, the early cigarette industry, to like the booming 50s and 60s, where advertisement and television and radio became really relevant, all the way to the age of the internet and mobile. We've seen this slow increase in brands using new technology to command our attention, right? They're using a great television show and the TV in our living room to make us aware about Coca-Cola and Revlon and sort of influence our buying behavior. And on the modern internet, what this looks like is all of these services that we're getting from Google and Facebook and Twitter for free, we're not getting them out of the goodness of these companies' hearts. These aren't nonprofits that are just like trying to do a public service. These companies are making money from selling your personal information to advertisers, right? So when you see an ad on your Google feed or your Facebook feed, it's tailored directly at you based on your previous behavior and who you associate with, and sometimes even like things picked up by your GPS and your microphone. And the future is getting even more intense about the personal information that's being collected. Now, advertisers often argue relevance. They say, well, this is an amazing development in advertising because instead of everyone having to sit through a makeup commercial like they did in the 50s, makeup commercials are going directly to people who are interested in makeup. But the reality is that, it hasn't really come true. Like certainly there's some examples of the relevance being really productive or some examples of it being neutral, but there's also examples of, where advertising has been shown to have links to childhood obesity and body image problems and all these messages that are being kind of driven into us based on what we like. Another great example is something that's called the filter bubble, where if you're looking at a Google search or a Facebook feed from someone who's on the left-leaning end of the political spectrum, you'll find results and ads that all sort of reinforce those ideologies, and you'll find censorship of anything that disagrees, because these algorithms are basically designed to give us what we want to maximize our attention and engagement. And so this is creating a lot of strange situations where our attention is being pulled into all these different directions in almost like a battleground of attention without our permission. And that's where it really becomes relevant to me. The reality is that Google is selling your attention to advertisers, but you're the one who has to actually pay attention. This is relevant, one, because you didn't necessarily agree to that, and Google is more and more becoming a relevant and important part of the public society. But two, because the evidence is starting to amount that a fragmented attention, wandering mind is not necessarily good for you, that it leads to negative affect and lowers our attention span, our ability to focus and be productive. There's a recent study out of Harvard that showed that our minds are wandering like 47% of the time, and it's associated with unhappiness. And there was another study by Microsoft that was in the context of advertising showing that our attention span has decreased even in the last 15 years. So all of this to say that our attention is being pulled from us in a way that's possibly seriously affecting our well-being, but at least against our rights. Because I believe that if this is a commodity market, it's an unfair one. And what I mean by that is, if we're selling lumber, if I have some lumber, right? Imagine I've got some wood and I sell it to someone who buys it. That's a very, very normal commodity market where I have this lumber and I'm selling it. But if Google has your attention, which it's attracting because it's basically a need in today's society, and it's selling it to someone else, Google is the one who decides who to sell it to, but it's your attention that's being sold. So if it's a commodity market and its attention is clearly my commodity, how come I have no right to my own attention? And how come I have no say? And that's where mindfulness comes in, because mindfulness trains us to take command of our own attention. So in some ways, it's a way to stand up to this modern economy and take control of what we deem relevant and what we want to pay attention to.
Yeah, I mean, this is huge, right? I mean, we're at once both incredibly empowered by, just the ridiculous availability of information and data at our fingertips on a daily basis. But, and then you bring up a good point. How do you have any control, if this is kind of like a barter economy or, a capitalist economy where somebody's selling your attention and it's literally being done without your consent, or, there's no I guess, gain whatsoever on a personal, spiritual, physical level for you, then, it seems a bit, what's the word, irresponsible in a way. But,
yeah, one thing you gain is you gain access to these platforms. So what you gain is Facebook and Google, which are amazing platforms that do incredible things to keep us connected and give us access to the world's information. But the problem is really that when your attention is sold and you're not deciding it, the reality is that advertising, later in your day, when you go walk around the city or the town or wherever you are, or browse the internet, take a look at the ads you see. You'll see that they very systematically target desires, insecurities, and fears. And the reality is that we are attracted to those things because they draw our attention. So when a commodity market is all about attention and people are fighting for our attention, then they're going to do whatever they can to grab that attention. And so, I recently saw an ad for one of those sort of really fancy credit cards like Visa Infinite Express Gold Platinum or whatever, and like
Gold Platinum.
Yeah, exactly right. And so the advertisement was basically, reminding me that I wasn't successful enough, right?
Right.
And you see this in the food industry, reminding you that, you're not eating, stuff that's delicious enough, and exercise making you feel like you're too fat. And, of course, body image, the way these models are portrayed, making you feel unattractive. And you know what I mean? So like, I want to say that this is a beautiful, neutral market, but I think that my prediction is that in the next 10, 20 years, we're going to start to see more and more clear evidence that having our attention constantly fragmented and drawn to things that are exacerbating our desires, insecurities, and fears is not a situation that's good for our mental health. And I would argue increases in, mental health conditions like depression and anxiety and eating disorders. I would argue that they're probably related. And I think we're going to start to see science point to that. And I think we're going to see that the growing interest in mindfulness meditation is not a coincidence. It's a response to a culture of attention theft, a culture where, I understand the easy transaction between me using Facebook and getting a relevant ad to my interests. But the reality behind the system is a little bit more sinister in my eyes, that there's a lot of my personal information being used to make sure that that ad is targeting me in ways that I can't ignore. That if I'm someone who tends to eat out a lot and it's something I'm working on, advertisements about eating out are going to be everywhere, and it's going to make it way, way harder for me to achieve that goal of trying to be imbalanced, right? If I'm someone who's concerned about career, who spends late nights lurking on LinkedIn, trying to network professionally, I'm going to be targeted with ads about, reminding me that I'm not successful enough and using that to sell me first-class airplane tickets to make myself feel better. So I'm kind of speaking a little bit conjecturally now and departing from the science, but you're getting a little bit of a window into what I predict in the coming years, because, I'm seeing this trend, and I'm seeing this interaction between the attention economy, mental health, and mindfulness. And so that's why I say that mindfulness is a form of activism. In my own life, being able to learn how to pay attention and how to choose what I want to pay attention to and how to be aware when my attention is being drawn to something has been instrumental in helping me be mentally healthier, physically healthier, more productive, more engaged, less likely to fall into negative cycles. It's very related to the world around me and the economy I live in.
Yeah, I mean that's huge, right? Not only from an advertising standpoint, but also with social media, right? I mean, I've noticed personally, and I'm sure you've delved pretty deep into a lot of the research on this, with things like social media. I mean, it definitely has an adverse effect to people psychologically when they're constantly scrolling through, what seemingly somebody's kind of avatar of their, best foot forward, kind of conveyed perfect life, right? Where a lot of the studies say that what people are constantly portraying on social media is essentially an extremely highly manicured version of more or less the archetypical person they'd like to be. And we're all kind of guilty of that in a way, right? We comb through our best pictures, and we kind of like to selectively put only the information that we think truly represents who we are. But I don't know if you can kind of speak for this too, and this sort of segues into my next question. But I'm pretty big on kind of like social media fasting and just sort of wading through the noise for true signal, like now, is more important than ever. So do you go through any of these periods where you kind of just like, we'll just say screw it, unplug, no social media, no Google, no ads, no nothing, no cell phone? I mean, do you think this is as important as any other tactic in order to kind of just maintaining a sanity in an extremely overstimulated world?
Yes, 100%. I mean, that's not just like a period. That's basically how I live my life. It really is. The first thing I'll say is that, yeah, there's a very specific study that showed that if you're showing depressive symptoms, using Facebook can exacerbate those depressive symptoms. It's not new that we present our best foot forward. We do that in person too. But there's, an element about Facebook's ubiquity. It's sort of like a bottomless feed that really glorifies people's perception of their lives. I've heard it described as life porn, which I thought was a good way to put it, which is like you kind of browse Facebook and you see the highlights of everyone's life. And it's almost this like, pornographic element about which vacations you could be on.
Yeah.
And just pulling you, where you could be successful in your job and who's having kids and their happy families and getting married. And if you're not in a great place, it can be a very detrimental thing. That being said, recently, actually last week, I was very inspired. There's a startup in New York City that's released a product called Talk Life. And it's the opposite. It's a social network designed for people to either personally or anonymously share when they're feeling depressed, when they're feeling down, when their relationships aren't working out. And instead of the like button, there's a support button and a hug button. So I went on there and saw lots of amazing exchanges between people really divulging some personal dark feelings and getting support from the community. So I'm really anticipating more and more amazing applications of technology like that. I was very inspired as someone involved in the intersection of technology and mental health. I've been working at it from the mindfulness side, but seeing someone who's approaching that social media thing is huge. Also, I know that Google and Facebook are both experimenting with new techniques to try to bring more authentic media coverage into their feeds, which I think is really, really great given the political situation. As for, these kind of detox elements in my personal life, I have a wide range. I've done some writing about it, but like, for example, I don't allow any internet in our bedroom. My wife and I, basically when we decide to go to the bedroom, it's, technology is out the window except for our e-reader, but no internet.
That's huge.
Yeah, no internet at all in the bedroom. At home, I don't allow myself to unplug my cell phone from the charger, so it stays tethered. And this prevents me from actually just kind of sinking into the couch. I use a program called Stay Focused, which locks me out of certain websites like Twitter and Facebook and Reddit between 7 a.m. and noon every day. So in the morning, I just can't automatically go onto those feeds. And then the rest of the day, I think I have a time limit, like 5 or 10 minutes on those sites. I use an app called Checky, which every day at noon tells me how many times I've checked my phone the previous day so I can stay aware if I become too phone addicted, which has actually been an incredible experience. When I first got it, I was absolutely shocked to learn that I glanced at my phone over 100 times a day. And now I'm usually around 20. So that's been a really incredible experience. I think there's an iOS version called Moment as well. I could go on. There's a whole bunch of things I do to manage technology. I mean, I think of it sort of like the way I might think about alcohol or other such drugs. Like it's something that I enjoy a glass of wine on the weekend. I like to have few drinks with the guys sometimes, but I'm aware that it's a drug. Like I'm not about to go have a beer at 8 in the morning. You know what I mean? So I feel the same way about technology. I'm aware of its power to command my attention, and therefore I strongly regulate it. And I look forward to a future where our governments and our society consider the idea that technology might be a drug too, because we have some interesting regulations and subsidies on the way we use alcohol and tobacco in our societies. And I think certain technological products are going to fit in that same category. There's a lot of recent research on video game and technology addiction to back that up too. And I think that body of literature is only going to grow.
Yeah, I mean, I forgot where I'd heard this, but essentially, I think we forget sometimes that we are pleasure monkeys, right? And that there's just hordes of things playing on our neurotransmitter levels on a day-to-day basis, and it's easy to kind of get caught up in the things that are constantly feeding those rushes. So I mean, these apps sound awesome. I'm definitely going to check some of these out. I've definitely dabbled in some of these, and I've never heard of Checky or Stay Focused, so I'll definitely have to give those a whirl. So it sounds like they're pretty impactful for you.
Yeah, they've been great, and I love the idea that there's these tools, because as our values change, our technology changes. And so as technology has grown how it is, and more people are interested in things like mental health and mindfulness, and the conversation is becoming more public, we're starting to see more and more cool technologies in the space as well, which I just think is great. And
Awesome. Okay.
The description
Sorry, go ahead.
of pleasure, the description of us as pleasure monkeys is really fun, because Stay Focused, for example, is something that limits you to go on certain websites, right? This technology was created for children. And I think it's kind of funny how we realize that it's very applicable to ourselves as well. That in some ways we're also just children, or we're just monkeys, and that, being able to use our executive control to regulate our own behavior is very relevant, I think, in today's society. And the commodification of attention and pleasure is huge, right? The same kind of, persuasive technology models and habit forming models that I use on a regular basis to try to make, Muse better at helping people form a solid meditation practice, are being used for Candy Crush, right? To make sure that you're as addicted as possible to crushing those gems, to the point that you're spending money and making money. And so we have this real moral crisis where technology isn't the problem, right? So don't get me wrong. Technology is a neutral tool that reflects the values of our society in terms of what we build. And it just so happens that our values are very consumerist and individualist and capitalist. And so we're seeing a lot of technologies that are all about keeping us organized, keeping us efficient, and keeping us productive. And so as our values start to become more about mental health and mindfulness, as that takes up more real estate in the collective consciousness, I'm really excited to see all these new technologies that are also exploring how technology might serve that purpose, in a really interesting way.
Awesome. This is a perfect segue to our next question. So I'm just curious. Everybody we get on the show, and this is kind of a sort of a topic du jour out there in the high performer sort of circles. But as we see Jay, who you are today, what's kind of like your daily routine? Like what's a primo high functioning day for Jay look like? From like what time do you get up in the morning? Like, are you meditating? What kind of mindfulness routines do you have? Like diet and exercise? Just walk me through your kind of high impact, like I'm crushing it Jay day.
Well, I certainly don't think of it as crushing it. I think like the days where I feel like I'm crushing it are imbalanced a little bit. So.
Gotcha. Sorry, didn't mean to come off too testosterone bro fueled there.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good. It actually reflects a really good, interesting thing. Like the days where I'm like wanting to crush it, I tend to throw myself off balance, because it kind of throws a sense of judgment in it. Like I've found that, so to answer your question more specifically, a great day, I wake up 7 in the morning, hit 45 minutes to an hour of yoga. And recently I've been exploring Mysore style yoga, which isn't kind of like the typical yoga class. You're kind of left to your own devices, and the teacher sort of comes and instructs you one-on-one, which has been really helpful to learn how to lead your own yoga practice. And that way you can do it on your own and not watch a video or go to some teacher. You learn how to own the practice. And so I've been really working on owning my practice and being able to just, bust out an hour of yoga till I'm sweating alone with no instructor, So waking up in the morning doing that. If I have the time, I like to throw in a good meditation after that. But if not, I'll meditate other times in the day. Meditation is not something I regiment. It's something that I kind of squeeze in. I try to do it every day, and I'm pretty successful at that. But I wouldn't say that I do it at a consistent time. Though I would recommend people try starting with a consistent time, because that is the best way to form a habit. But now for me, I'm reaching this point where like I'm meditating maybe sometimes after work, maybe sometimes late at night, sometimes in the morning. There's all these little nooks and crannies in the day where, you do your morning routine and then you don't have to be at a meeting and there's like 5 or 10 minutes there to kill. And I think a lot of people end up jumping on email, doing a couple of Facebooks or whatever in those 5 or 10 minutes. So that's where I try to squeeze meditation. I try to bring meditation in, if I finish my breakfast early, I throw it 10 minutes in the morning. If I get home from work and my wife isn't home yet, I bust in like 20 or 30 minutes there. Or if I'm, done with what I want to do in the evening, but I'm not quite tired, ready for bed, I'll throw it in there. So that's kind of how I fit sort of physical and mental health practices into my day. I like to read before bed. And in the middle, what I try to do is I try to focus on one task at a time. I try to keep distractions out of the way. And I try to follow my own attention, right? So if I find myself preoccupied with a certain task or a certain project in my thoughts, I kind of put everything away and I go work on that there. And then if I start to disengage and I'm starting to get distracted because I'm thinking about, a certain song I'm writing, then I'll just take a break and I'll go play some guitar for a while. You know what I mean? I try to follow my own attention. So when I notice my mind is wandering to something, I let my body go wander to it as well. And this is something that's come after years and years of meditation, to be really aware of when your mind is wandering. I think a lot of people misinterpret mindfulness to be about clearing your mind, but I think it's really about, meta awareness, being aware of what you're thinking about. And so that's allowed me, like even now, to know that right now I'm thinking a lot about a certain document that I'm working on. So after this call, I'm going to move into to work on that document because it's something that kind of came to mind a few minutes ago. So I know that my attention is naturally going there, so I'm going to follow it,
Right. You're just yielding to flow as opposed to putting up the resistance wall.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to put the resistance wall up, of course, but I try my best to yield to the flow of my own mind and attention. And, that allows for great restful periods, great periods of entertainment, but also wonderful periods of, productivity and value creation and engagement and stuff like that too.
Fantastic. Okay, music geek time. I know I kind of gave you a heads up on this, but I heard you mention, if you're working on a song or whatever. So, I'm a musician. I'm a vinyl freak myself. I'm a big collector. I've got a lot of mixtapes for the blog, and I play a bunch of instruments myself. So, when I kind of, just a heads up for our listeners, I stumbled upon your email and saw that you had a Miles Davis quote in your signature. So I was pretty pumped up to see that. So I just kind of wanted to hear sort of like, what your history is with music. Like, what instruments do you play? Do you kind of write your own music? You said it sounds like, and then I noticed you'd also do some volunteer work as a musician, kind of on that end as well. So I just kind of wanted to see, like, what instruments do you play? What's your bag here?
Yeah, music is life, kind of.
Oh, it's everything. It's religion.
Yeah, but in both ways, right? Because in one way, it's like when I discovered it, 18, 19 or so, I realized that I realized that music wasn't all about like, I think my parents put me in like a piano class when I was like 12 and I hated it. And I think I went like the next couple of years just thinking I'm not into music. It's, I like listening to it a little bit, but whatever. But as I got more and more into finding music I loved, like I discovered hip hop in high school and funk and classic rock. And I really loved it. And then I kind of got into garage rock a little bit, and I decided to kind of pick up my guitar, and it was way different. Learning guitar by learning your favorite songs was way different than like going to some class and learning theory.
It's fun.
Yeah, it's like fun and it's engaging and it's, and it's life. So at that point, just like in life, I was 18, 19. I was naive and optimistic about just doing whatever I felt was good. I was kind of selfish, I just wanted to have a good time, play music. So, started some bands. We did some touring. Managed, I'd say overall, broke even, which is pretty successful for an independent musician. But like,
Yeah, that's a win.
yeah, like didn't have any like widespread success or anything like that, but it was one of the most transformative parts of my life for sure. Just getting together with a bunch of guys, dropping out of school, touring around, writing music with them, playing it, making some amazing connections, some amazing friends. And so then, as life went on and I started to get more into this life, I continued playing music. I joined some bands on the side. At one point, I moved out to Vancouver and I didn't really have network there. And so I started playing on my own. And so I went from like my early bands were like loud, sort of psychedelic rock and roll. And I was playing guitar and singing. And then in one band, I was touring on drums as well. But when I moved out to Vancouver, I didn't have anyone around. And so I found myself just sort of playing my acoustic guitar a lot at home, started, focusing on songwriting. And I played a couple of solo shows out in Vancouver. And, I just got bit by a whole different bug because it wasn't about just like having a good time and drinking and partying anymore. It was like I started to get into the subtleties of songwriting as a craft to really manifest and express my emotions. And I also found it really difficult because it's like just you up there and, people are talking over you sometimes, which hurts the ego. And sometimes the song doesn't go well and everyone hears your mistakes. And it just became part of my, my sort of discovery of self and like trying to figure out what it was that made me want to play music. And so, and more recently, now I'm still writing a lot of music, and I find myself less interested in the productification of music. So, I'm not even interested in sort of making albums. Like that's been an interest for a long time, but that just feels so like product to me. And I design products in my day job. I'm kind of really interested in writing songs just for the sake of writing them. But just like life, there's like a strange sort of balance and frustration there where, sometimes I pick up my guitar and it just flows out and I feel an emotion, and I communicate it, and I feel so satisfied with the creative process and how it makes me feel and how it makes my body feel and how great it feels to sort of settle and express a feeling. But then other times I pick it up and I feel like kind of alone, and I feel like, there's no connection with the music, and there's no product to be made. There's no, big audiences, and there's no people listening. And it's kind of reminding me that I want to like get out and play in jams. And so I feel like in this whole story, you can see music kind of, echoing the same battles of self and identity and ego that are a part of every life. Like, who am I? What am I? What am I feeling? And my own self-awareness and my own, dealing with my own selfishness, dealing with my own creativity, dealing with the balance between what is art and what is a product. So that's why I say music is life. It's like, it's almost like a perfect little petri dish to explore with almost every mental state, from emotional turmoil to euphoria, to social connection, to selfishness and ego, to selflessness. And that's where the volunteer work comes in. And so, it's a whole story,
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head, and it's awesome how you touched on like the multifaceted nature of music. Where I guess most of my background was more so kind of like just like jamming and playing rock music and a lot of improvisation. And there's kind of like a self-transcendent sort of primal kind of one of a group making sort of a mosaic of sound kind of thing. But then you touched on the singer-songwriter aspect of it, which is like such a whole different dynamic, right? Where it's just a guy or a girl and the guitar, and then all of a sudden it's like the human experience and the human condition and like the emotion and all that, and there's a fragility there, but it's incredibly cathartic. So I mean, there's just so many avenues to go down. I mean, it's pretty incredible the degree to which music can just tap into some seriously deep states. But
yeah.
Okay, so I was just curious, what are some of your I'm sorry, go ahead. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, I love that you use the word fragile. I think that captures it perfectly because, like, playing in loud bands, I had some really, really awesome times, and like, made some lifelong connections with my bandmates and some of the people we met then. But as a solo singer-songwriter, I can tell you that I've had some of the most euphoric, positive emotions that I've ever had in my entire life on stage alone with a guitar. And I've probably had some of my most darkest, negative emotions that I've ever experienced also on stage with a guitar, right? So that fragility, like, within this single act of just standing in front of a room of other people with this guitar and some words you wrote, and just doing it, you're able to, within the inside like 20 or 30 minutes, you're able to experience true self-transcendence and connection, as well as complete isolation and loneliness, and then just like walk off the stage and order a beer. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty brave, the degree to which it's, you're basically bearing your soul when you're kind of up there and then bringing your songs to the world in such a stripped down manner. So it's something I really haven't like dove into just yet. So I'll definitely have to check out some of your work, and we'll have to swap some ideas here moving forward. It's definitely interesting.
Yeah, let's do it.
But okay, so this is like something I kind of ask anybody and everybody who crosses my path who's a music junkie too. So what are some of your remote island albums? Meaning if you were with Tom Hanks out in the middle of nowhere, you had to grab like 3 records, and those were the only records you had to listen to for the rest of your days. Your total irreplaceable all-time albums. What are some of them?
Okay, that's tough.
I know it's a crazy question, but all I ask is just do your best.
Okay, so I'm just going to shoot from the hip here. There's definitely something from Led Zeppelin. Definitely something from The Doors.
Oh yeah.
I think there would probably be Howlin' Wolf, which is like an old blues singer.
Oh yeah, I love Howlin' Wolf.
Yeah. More modern, I think White Blood Cells by the White Stripes. 13 Tales from Urban Bohemia by the Dandy Warhols.
Okay.
I think Inner Speaker by Tame Impala.
Oh yeah, incredible record.
Yeah, it's such a great album. It's like I can't even, words can't describe the feeling. I think
I remember when that first album came out, and it was just like sort of this unknown, like, who's this guy that sounds like John Lennon,
Yeah, totally.
I mean, that was a game-changing record. I'm totally happy you brought that one up.
Yeah, I loved it. I think there's some other ones that come to mind. Also, A Tribe Called Quest. I think that would capture like my hip hop quota.
Oh yeah.
A Tribe Called Quest. Like they released a new album, which was pretty good, but some of their classic stuff is just unreal. I love it. I feel like the only side of this that I'm not really, I'm thinking about the desert island. Like I'm thirsty. I'm going to be thirsty for hip hop at some point. I got Tribe.
Right.
Going to be thirsty for like Psych. I got Tame Impala. I got The Doors. Thirsty for that bluesy rock. I got Led Zeppelin and the White Stripes. I think the other thirst I might have is for like, honestly, I grew up playing a lot of video games, and I really loved, just because they're so deeply written into my head, the music from the Final Fantasy series of games. And so growing up, it like kind of taps into a childhood pleasure for me. So I think I would actually throw in some of like the piano renditions, like done by classical musicians, of some of the music from the early Final Fantasy games, if that doesn't single me out as a nerd too much.
No, that's amazing. I mean, that's you've covered every base. You've got the nostalgia pick down pat. So that's
Also,
that's an awesome
I gotta add Freewheelin' Bob Dylan for the folk kick. And I think I've said enough, but like I could probably go on for a while. Oh, also In a Silent Way by Miles Davis, which we already talked about, you and I, right? So I got to get my jazz kick in there too. So you can see it that I want a little representative of all the various genres that I love, and got a little folk country in there, a little psych, a little blues rock, a little hip hop, and I think hip hop kind of covers the funk a little bit too. I got a little jazz. Yeah, I think that covers it. I think that's the best you're gonna get from me by just shooting from the hip.
Oh yeah, I mean honestly, that's more than I expected, and I think we'd probably have a pretty good time geeking out over records here, because basically everything you named I was pretty jazzed up about. So that's perfect answer, and it's kind of hard to pick, right? It's like if somebody put a gun to my head, I'd probably say just shoot me, because I don't even know if I could pick. So you're a braver man than I am, but all the answers, and yeah, I definitely see a lot of similarities there. So very cool, very cool.
Nice. And don't worry, I did notice you said jazzed up. That was a really clever pun.
Yeah, insert corny pun here.
Well done. Well played, sir. Well played.
Awesome. Perfect. Perfect outro. So I know I gave you a heads up about our little 3-question roundup here at the end. So maybe we'll wrap up. I don't want to take up too much of your time here. So obviously something I do with all my guests, just try to get a little bit of a kind of a package deal here towards the end, and just try and get some high level thoughts on what makes Jay tick as a person. So
Cool.
I guess my first question is standing here today in 2017 and this incredibly interesting landscape of a world we find ourselves in today. What do you think is something that's like so incredibly important and salient right now that we need to be focusing on that's going to impact years ahead?
I think you gave the answer in your question, which is the word focus. And I think I'm really, really concerned about mental health in the light of everything that's happening around us. I'm equally concerned about sustainability and about income inequality and diversity. But fundamentally, I think that the core cause of these issues are about our mental health and wellness. I think our ability to find the virtuous cycle between compassion, positive action, a state of focus, and a state of well-being is absolutely critical for the future of our species. The more we're able to very clearly experience, see, and learn from the fact that being compassionate for others and for the world around us causes our own health and well-being, the more and more we're going to be able to build the world we want to live in. So the more that everyone can kind of turn on to that fact and put the effort into experiencing and learning from mindfulness and compassion and their ability to allow us to not only survive but thrive in this world, the more of a harmonious and beautiful society I think we're going to live in.
Yeah, that's an amazing answer. And it's funny because I was actually thinking about something similar the other day. It's that, in every moment you kind of have a choice to opt towards, the default to anger and, kind of sort of the darkness. And then you can also just as easily make a choice to opt for compassion. And I think it's something that just kind of yields like such a better flow in your life, when you just kind of, and it's not easy to constantly just have that default to, the sky is blue mentality, because there are some difficult moments. But yeah, I think just at least that mindset, it already sets you up for a win-win kind of life. So that's a perfect answer.
Yeah, I love that you use the word choice, because it's like, it's the thing that's hard about it is actually working to truly live in that, fraction of a second where you have choice. Because the reality is we're embodied creatures. Someone does something and we just feel it in our heart and our face and we get anger. And you have like less than a second to identify that emotional switch and deal with it skillfully and compassionately. And really what mindfulness is all about is training that half second, training to notice that you do have a choice. And often it feels like we don't have a choice, and it's easy to say we should choose compassion, but I think it takes a little bit of work to be able to really identify that half a second moment where you truly do have a choice. Because once your body reacts and you light up and the anger comes, you've missed the choice. The choice is gone. And so, what we're sitting there doing when we're meditating is we're practicing and learning how to find that awareness to truly see the choices we have, when often they seem automatic, but they're not.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Perfect, Jay. Okay, moving forward here. Actually, this is kind of a two-part question in regards to a specific book, but I just wanted to know twofold. What specific book and what personal belonging or gift that was maybe under $100 or so made the biggest waves in your life? And then I want to sidetrack here too, because I know you mentioned a book earlier, and I just wanted to clarify for our listeners. I think you said it was Gödel Escher Bach. Was that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, is that the name of the book, or is that the author? Or?
That's the name of the book. The author is Douglas Hofstadter.
Okay.
Yeah.
But, okay, perfect. Yeah, I didn't want to miss that one. But I guess then just kind of reverting back here, what if you had to pick one book and then one personal belonging, that are kind of all time for you and made the biggest waves and impacted your life? I mean, what would they be?
Yeah, I think Gödel Escher Bach definitely made a lot of impact, but I think that's specific to me. Like I think that's it really just turned me on to cognitive psychology and just this entire world, which may not resonate with everyone. It's kind of a cryptic book. If I had to say something more recently and more universal, is I read a book called *Sapiens* by Yuval Harari.
Oh,
Um,
great book.
yeah, I would say that it's one of the most spiritual books I've ever read, and it's not about meditation or anything like that. It's about, the anthropology of the human race and who we are and how we got here from a historical perspective. And it's just extremely enlightening about the deeper forces that be in our history, not in the sense of like, oh, like so and so was the president in this year, like that kind of history that you learn in high school, but like history of like what happened between the Homo sapiens and the Neanderthals, and how did we evolve to become an agricultural species, and why did we stop being hunter gatherers? And he starts from there and he goes all the way to the present era, talking about politics and sports and like all of these cultural phenomena and how they relate to our deepest histories and sort of evolved behaviors. And as for a belonging, like I gotta say that I don't know what happened that day where I decided to go on Craigslist and buy an $80 beat up classical guitar when I was 18. But it absolutely changed my life, man. Like I got this guitar and I sat there and I just started. I think the first song I tried to play was Susie Q by CCR. And I
Oh
and
yeah.
I don't know, I don't know what it was. I would say that I've been playing guitar for like decades, and you know, not a single day have I quote unquote practiced guitar. It's always just been an absolute joy to engage with, even when it sucks. It's just this natural part. It's this natural part of life. Like I've never had to be like, oh, I better practice. It's just like I already by default play way more than anyone would want to try to practice. I don't know what it is, but some day when I was 18, I drove out to this dude's house and he bought this $80 guitar off Craigslist and changed my life, man.
No, that's incredible. You're preaching to the choir there. I guess a quick little interesting side story. I won't be too long here, but I'd always kind of just played, I played electric guitar more or less my whole life, and I'd never really tapped into kind of like the classical acoustic nylon string guitar. And I just recently took a little bit of a jaunt through like a couple months in Europe, and then I spent some time in Morocco as well.
Mm,
And I met some really, really awesome guys in Morocco, and kind of pretty bare bones setup, right? It was a bunch of university guys, and we were more or less just kind of sitting around on the floor at their house, and they busted out a couple acoustic classical nylon string guitars, which I'd never played before. And
right.
we just set up a drum circle, and we were just strumming these guitars that I'd never really like, because there's like such high action on it, and you got to really bend your wrist to like press the strings down. And I just remember thinking, like, yeah, like similarly, it was probably like an $80 guitar, but it was one of the most incredible experiences of my life. So, I can totally see how that would be your answer. So
Yeah, it's magic.
it's total magic, absolute magic. But perfect, Jay. Okay, coming up with our last question here, a little bit more of a broad stroke question, kind of a three-part question. But given the specific Jay, the man that you are today, the embodied consciousness of the human being that you are, what are your three most important pieces of advice you could impart to our listeners, be it any walk of life whatsoever? What would you like to pass along? What would you write on the walls of the cave here?
Oh, wow. Not making it easy. Okay. I'm going to go with the first thing is that, that we're all connected. And that's not just humans, it's animals and the earth and stuff like that. Like, there isn't any light without dark to define it. And there isn't any, noise without silence to define it. And similarly, there isn't any you without the world around you and the others around you to define it. And so I think it's just always important to remember that fact. That's one. Number two, I think to remember that you are not your mind.
Yes.
That your thoughts and your emotions and your arms and your legs, your body, it's all this strange experience of being human. And that if you go and, if you go and do a little investigation of your conscious experience, I can't at all guess what you'll find because you're a different person than me, but it's not going to be what you figured out rationally. There's going to be something else. It's like, there's this great quote that I'll paraphrase from Dune, like the classic sci-fi book, which is basically that, like, Muad'Dib in the book says basically that we hope and we dream and we try that the whole world is going to be rational and that everything's going to make sense, but reality is always one step beyond that rationality, and we don't know what it is. It could be just consciousness and subjective experience, but always remember that you are a subjective experience and that you don't know everything. No matter how much you study up, there's something strange going on, and I don't purport to know what it is, but whenever you think that, whenever you think that you're right, maybe take a step back and remember that there's different perspectives out there,
Absolutely.
And I think the final thing is that as a species, as a civilization, we're totally doomed, or we're totally fucked if we can't figure out how to respectfully disagree with each other.
Wow, that's those are three heavy hitters there, and I think probably super salient given everything that's going on today. So, three great answers there, Jay.
Thanks, man. I was just shooting from the hip. Honestly, that last one was a bit easier than trying to name the albums, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't purport to say this is going to be easy, but hopefully it's fruitful. So, these are incredible answers, and you definitely, you've given our listeners a ton of nuggets of wisdom here. So, we just want to say, thanks a lot for coming on the show today, Jay. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. Much love. This was great, and I appreciate challenges. And this was definitely not easy, but it was definitely fun, and I feel like I cleared a few things up in my own head just talking to you. So, thanks so much.
Sweet, awesome. Yeah, we'll cut it here. I'm not just gonna hang up on you just yet. I just want to say goodbye and everything. But
cool.
Yeah, no, I have to say your first answer reminded me of did you ever get into Alan Watts at all? You ever check out any of his stuff?
Yeah, I love Alan Watts. He's great.
Yeah, he's a total G, and your response just made me think about how he's always kind of talking about the Gestalt psychology kind of stuff, and that's spot on to kind of your first answer, is that we sort of we kind of view our lives in this sort of self-centered isolation, but it's we can't exist without being derivative of every single thing directly around us.
Yeah, totally. I love Alan Watts. I'm so glad you brought him up. To give you the full story, I have this collection of Alan Watts books that it's just he's the author that I can turn to when I just need some light yet heavy reading, it's I don't want to read something trite, but I don't want to be too focused.
Right.
He has a way of taking these really heavy concepts and making them so pleasurable in stream of consciousness. He has this charisma. It's magical. Yeah.
Yeah. It's insane because, sometimes people make fun of me because I used to just lay down and fall asleep to his voice recordings. But yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, he just had such an incredible conversational flow and such a good way to convey ideas. And I was just yeah, this guy is telling me about the banality of human existence, and I'm okay with that.
Yeah, he just has that. He has that that smirk. Yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible. So yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you. When you need something lighthearted but definitely deep and not meaningless, he's kind of a go-to. So
yeah.
And then
totally.
got to say, I love your music calls too, man. I'm a huge Doors fan, huge Miles Davis fan. I kind of bounce around in those guys pretty hardcore.
Yeah, where are you now? You're in California, did you say, or where are you?
So I'm in Detroit right now. I'm just staying with a friend for a little while, and then I'm actually in the process of moving out to San Fran. So been kind of bouncing all over the place. I actually literally 3 months ago just up and quit my uber cushy kind of corporate gig and I'm looking to make my way west and kind of start fresh, and did some traveling in between then and now, and it's been a little bit of a scary but incredible experience. I've been working on the blog and trying to build everything out and just meeting as many people as I can. So it's it's been fun, and it's been a risk, but it's no growth, no risk, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, if we ever end up in the same city, we'll have a little jam. It'll be fun.
Honestly, I would love that. I haven't been to Toronto in a little while, but it's like one of those cities that's like high radar now because I just fell in love with it when I went there. So yeah, next time I'm in town, or if you make your way out west by the time I'm out there, I mean, I'd absolutely, in the bare minimum, love to grab a drink with you and geek out on some music, or definitely get a jam in.
Let's do it, man. Looking forward to it. So stay in touch. Maybe connect on like Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook or whatever.
Sweet, perfect. All right, man. Well, thanks for taking the time. I know it was kind of a pain in the ass at the beginning, but you were super cool about it. So I appreciate you allocating more time that was maybe in your schedule, but looks like you'll be good for 3 o'clock. So I really appreciate it, man.
No worries. This was fun. Take care, man. Appreciate it. Nice to meet you.
All right, dude. You too. Stay in touch.
All right. See ya.